may be asking yourself right about now, did he really find a medieval version of uh, Dr. Dre's Still Dre to play as an intro song? Yes. Yes, I did. I was trying to give it a break from all the Tom Brady hate for maybe at least 1 week, and there you guys go. Um, so sorry, this is a day late. We're going, gotta didn't can't talk. Didn't feel so great yesterday. Tired from all the heat. I am glad that is no longer 97 degrees outside, and that is starting to cool off. So today's gonna be a little bit of a longer episode as well. Gonna go over a couple things, including a little bit of the couple of the games from last week. We're gonna go over the highest point scores for fantasy. Going to go over waivers, a little bit of fab stuff, and at the end we're going to get into the power rankings. So to start it off, wrote down 4 games that I felt were kind of interesting for last week. Number 1, Jets and Browns. So didn't watch any of these games because I was too busy watching the Colts shit on themselves the whole week or the whole game. Terrible game. It actually put me to sleep. I haven't taken a nap in a couple of years, but the Colts successfully put me to sleep. But anyway, the Jets and the Browns. Joe Flacco. This dude hasn't been relevant for how many years now? And all of a sudden, Joe freaking Flacco is lighting the fantasy world on fire as well as the NFL world. Being a better quarterback than Zach Wilson could ever dream of being, throwing for 307 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Browns as the Jets won the game, I think. Yes. No. I have no idea. Oh my God, live on podcast, I'm freaking out. Like, did I write that down wrong? Yes, the Jets won 31-30. He was throwing the ball a lot to Garrett Wilson, who we'll get into a little bit later in the waivers part, was 8 receptions, 102 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He lighting the world on fire from Old Man Joe. On the Browns side of the ball, Nick Chubb, 17 for 87 and 3 touchdowns. Very good fantasy day for him as well in the losing effort. Next game was Commanders and Lions. So this one's interesting to me because Carson Wentz, who spent all year sucking on the Colts last year, is also doing pretty damn good for fantasy, throwing the ball a lot. Against the Lions, had 337 yards and 3 touchdowns. Got 3 viable wide receivers in Washington. Whoever thought we would be saying that, in Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson, the rookie, who I'm impartial to because he's on my team, but let's move on. The Lions, Jared Goff, also don't have his stat line on my thing here, but Jared Goff is kind of the same thing. He's just, we all think, Jared Goff sucks as a quarterback, and maybe he does, but for fantasy, he's doing all right. Throwing the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who, holy shit. 9 receptions, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a pretty good week last week as well. I don't have the stats for that because I am not prepared, but lighting the world on fire. The other Sunday game that everyone probably knows all about, Dolphins and Ravens. So I was watching this game like by the stat line on the fantasy app because I had a couple players and was interested in how everybody was doing, and it was like halftime, I think. Lamar Jackson wasn't doing so hot. The Ravens were winning by a lot, and I was like, okay, well, that sucks. The Dolphins lost. I fall asleep. I wake back up, and Lamar Jackson and the Dolphins, Tua, Tyreek, and Waddle set the world on fire while I was asleep. So for Lamar Jackson, 318 yards, 3 touchdowns in the passing game, and 119 yards rushing with 1 rushing touchdown. Holy shit. For the Dolphins, Tua, I'm not going to even... Tua Tagovailoa, I can't say his last name, guys. 469 yards and 6 passing touchdowns. Wow. Didn't think he had it in him. 2 number 1 wide receivers for him. Tyreek Hill with 11 for 190 and 2 touchdowns. And then Jalen Waddle for 11, 171 and 2 touchdowns. I would have never, if you would have told me at the start of the season that Tua would be a top 5 quarterback right now in the NFL, I would tell you that you're smoking something stronger than crack. But yet, here we are. So moving on from that game, we had the Monday night game, which is the game that we chose to watch, was the Bills and Titans, and that was about a half a game. The Bills just freaking ran away with it, like by far. I think they pulled Henry and Ryan Tannehill and all them at the third quarter, if I'm remembering correctly. It was not much of a game whatsoever. Hold on, I'm trying to find something. I don't have my notes for some reason. Okay. Josh Allen threw for 317 yards and 4 touchdowns. Most of those went to Stephon Diggs, who had 12 receptions for 148 yards and 3 touchdowns. Sorry, I need a drink of water. Yeah, that was basically in one half of football because, like I said, they pulled the starters at about the third quarter after the Bills took a crazy lead. Anyway, so moving on from that, we're actually going to take a little bit of a break here. We got some breaking news, actually. I'll show you guys on the screen here. I'm not like real political or anything, but apparently there is photographic evidence of Donald Trump grabbing a pussy. I'll leave it up on the screen so you guys can see it. If you don't believe me, it's 100% true. Right there is the photographic evidence. Okay. Jokes aside, getting back to the football here. I'm gonna go over not just the big scores players wise. John and Tiffany this week. John beat Tim and scored 178.5 points. This dude's team: Patrick Mahomes, 21 points, Cooper Kupp, 31 points, Tyreek Hill, 42 points, Nick Chubb, 32 points, and the Buffalo freaking defense for 21 points. Like, how do you even try to beat a week like that? Tiff tried, and she beat Ben, scoring 175 points. Large part thanks to Stephon Diggs with 44 points, Amon-Ra St. Brown with 39.4 points, Aaron Jones with 32, and Rashad Bateman with 20. Really, really big weeks from those two this week. Moving on to the waivers. We didn't have a whole lot of action on the waivers this week, actually. We just had one really big waiver claim. Biggest one so far this year. I don't even remember one being this big last year. Joe emptying out the wallet for Garrett Wilson, spending $54 on Garrett Wilson, which insane amount of money. The next highest bid, though, was $31. So Joe could have saved a little bit of that money in hindsight. Now, the other thing I'm going to go ahead and add in here real quick. When I go over these and say, like, oh, could have saved some money, I'm not saying, like, you're an idiot because you spent, whatever. That's just like the funny hindsight point of Fab is you don't know. So when you really want a guy, you go up and overpay, and it's just more or less like poking fun at the person who overpaid way more than they needed to in hindsight. The other waiver ad, Tiffany added Tyler Higbee for $16, and the next highest bid was $9. So not as much of a overpay, but you know, segueing into that, people low on Fab. Um, Joe has $19 left after spending $54 on Garrett Wilson, and I can't remember how much on Jeff Wilson last week. I guess he really loves the Wilson brothers. And the next lowest would be Kim, who has $66 left. The other two people who are really, really stingy are Lance and Ben, who have not spent $1 of Fab this year. Guys, you know it's not real money, right? You can't take it with you. You don't get any of the money back from your buy-in. Okay, I was just making sure, just throwing that out there. Breaking news again. Oh my God. Such a tragedy, travesty, whatever you want to call it. Maybe now this explains a lot on why Giselle left Tom. Tom Brady's mistress found dead in Tampa this morning. Oh God, I don't even know if I should show that picture. It's so graphic. Let's go back. All right, back into it. Power rankings. Not too much has changed, but everything has changed all at the same time. The thing that I put the most into as far as the power rankings is the points for, because I mean I'm kind of a decent example for the points for. So I've scored a lot of points for. I've scored the fourth highest in the league, but yet I'm 0-2. So I take that into account, as well as record and matchup and who you lost to and everything else like that. So anyway, let's get into it. We're actually gonna change it up a little bit. Instead of starting from 1, we're gonna start from 10 and work our way up. So at number 10, down 5 spots from last week, we have Matt, 0-2 with 258 points scored total on the year. I should have wrote down who they played last week, but I didn't. This is the problem with working a full day and then coming home and trying to record something like this. I'm literally not prepared whatsoever. I do have who he plays next week, though. Matt plays Joe, which, with the amount of points that Joe's been scoring, seems like a pretty tough matchup. At number 9, we have Ben, who is also 0-2. He's down 1 spot from last week's power rankings. 260 points scored on the year. And Ben plays yours truly next week. So that'll be a fun little bragging rights matchup. We usually have a little bit of fun with that. Speaking of me, at number 8, we have me. 0-2, 277 points scored, down 4 spots from last week. I'm not going to go off on a tangent on why I hate Lamar Jackson or why my team decides to only score about 10 to 15 points per player every week and consistently put me in the highest scoring categories, but still lose to what I view as lesser teams week in and week out. But my opponent from this last week, it's just tradition at this point for me to lose. Yeah, I play Ben. Speaking of my opponent from last week, at number 7, we have Kim with a 1-1 record. You're welcome for the win, by the way, as is tradition. Up 3 spots from last week with 226 points scored on the year. The lowest in the league, yet beat me. plays Tim next week. And speaking of Tim, at number 6, we have Tim. 1-1 record, 232 points scored, moved 0 spots from last week's power rankings, and plays his wife this week in fantasy, hopefully not sleeping on the couch if he wins. Moving up to number 5, we have Lance with a 1-1 record. 248 points scored, down 2 spots from last week, only strictly because of big weeks from other people. He plays Ryan this week. Number 4, we have Tiffany with a 1-1 record. Had a monster week this week, as we said earlier. 283 points on the year, up 5 spots from last week, but this week she's playing the juggernaut that is John and his crazy team, who keeps throwing up major numbers week in, week out so far. Number 3, we have our 3, 2, and 1. We have our undefeated teams. Number 3 is Ryan at 2-0, 272 points scored, up 4 spots from last week, and plays Lance this week. So a couple of teams here gonna be losing their undefeated record, possibly. Number 2, we have Joe, who's 2-0, 302 points scored, didn't move from last week's power rankings, and plays Matt. So we've got 2-0 Joe versus 0-2 Matt. Matt looking for a win. Matt looking for Joe to lose. And number 1, obviously no surprise, we have the 2-0 RoboCup John. 348 points on the year. Obviously, it was number 1 last week, number 1 this week. He plays Tiffany this week. If Tiff's team can produce like they did last week, then that should be a really good game. Matchup of the week is either going to be Tiff and John for the high points scored total that could be, or Ben and Tyler, I don't know why I said Tyler, Ben and myself. One of us is going to leave that game with a win, and the other one is going to leave 0-3. And we all know that I'm going to leave 0-3. But anyway, how the mighty have fallen. That's all I've got, guys. Again, if anyone wants to join a Discord call with me and get on here and we can talk about, previous games, the landscape of your team, stuff like that, anything that you guys want to talk about, just so it's not just me rambling into a microphone, boring the hell out of you guys for 19 minutes and 11 seconds going. So, yeah. If you guys have anything that you want to discuss, let me know. Try to get you on here. But that's all I have. Let's go back to some medieval Dre. To close out the show. Gotta love it. Hope this isn't copyright. Didn't think about that until I started playing the music. Anyway, thanks for watching.